back to A Well-Designed Business. My name is LuAnn, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company WindowWorks from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Big announcement before I start the show today. Will you be in High Point this October 2022? If yes, guess what? Jaipur Living and My Doma Studio are throwing me a birthday party. Yes, they surprised me with this. And I cannot tell you how grateful and excited I am to share my big 6-0 with all of you, right? So if you're going to be in town, the party is on Sunday, October 23rd at 2:00 p.m. at Jaipur Showroom. We will put the RSVP link in the show notes, and I just cannot wait to celebrate my big 6-0 with all of you. All right, today's guest is Michelle Lynn. Michelle is the president of ML Interiors Group, a successful design firm based in Dallas. Michelle is also the founder of Designed for the Creative Mind, where she teaches you, interior designers and decorators, the proven practices, effective processes, and profitable systems to run your business with purpose and efficiency. Now, Michelle leads a thriving 7-figure interior design business. And by what I can tell so far, she does this by two main ways: by unapologetically leading her company and her clients. Right? As the CEO, she leads her company and her clients, and by having and sticking to the systems and processes in her business. Michelle has so much to offer. I really could have asked her to talk on any number of topics, but we decided to talk on this topic that I get requested a lot: what constitutes billable hours. However, I do encourage you to head over to Michelle's own podcast, Designed for the Creative Mind, where you can get more of her wisdom. Okay. Now, I'm wondering if today you might be a little surprised how Michelle tackled this topic. So, like I was. I loved it, though, by the way, just as a little teaser and a hint. Okay. And I also cannot let this go by. If you remember the episode with Alinda Morris, we'll put that link in the show notes as well. And if you haven't listened to that, I encourage you to go listen to that, because Alinda had an she shared her aha moment with us on the show that she had already come to when she came to the interview. And that moment was, for her, at one point she recognized that if she was either sending clients invoices without all of the billable hours, you know that where you do send it for 9, but you really work 12, or she wasn't actively meeting a certain number of billable hours per week. Like she just wasn't thinking about it. One week she would and one week she wouldn't. She said she had this moment where she understood that when she doesn't meet the number of billable hours required to keep her company in the profit zone, she recognized that she was actually borrowing money from her family. Now, she wasn't physically going and getting a loan from her family's finances, but if she spent the whole week working in her firm and didn't do any billable activities, it was sort of like, well, who paid her that week? Right? So it's a completely different conversation, but I know that it's important to have all the conversations around billable hours so that you can get to that place where you take a little from one, a little from another, and do the thing that feels right to you. Okay? So I highly encourage you to check that show out after this one. In the meantime, buckle up, because Michelle is a smart lady, and I'm excited to share this episode with you. Hi, Michelle. Thanks so much for joining me on A Well-Designed Business today.
Thanks, LuAnn. I am so excited to be here. I feel like I've come full circle. I used to be a big listener of your podcast when I first started my business.
Oh my goodness, that is so awesome to hear. And that's a big honor because I am seeing everything that you're doing in the coaching and mentoring space for interior designers. And I just had the absolute like privilege of seeing you deliver for the first time in real life when we were both at the IDS conference in Chicago over the summer. And you killed it, lady. You really killed it. I loved your presentation.
Thank you so much. But I got to tell you, you sitting right there front and center had me a little nervous. What is she doing?
You said that afterwards that day. That's so funny. But like I mean I just picked a scene.
You were surrounded by friends.
Yes, that's what it was. I went and I sat with the Dallas IDS chapter, right?
Yes, ma'am. They're all badass.
Yes, they are. And that's the thing. It was funny because I actually chose that seat because at that day, that was the last day of the conference. And I like walked in and I saw them. I was like, I haven't had any time with you ladies, because I do know the women in the
Yeah.
Dallas chapter. And so I walked right up and I like put myself right in the middle of them. And that was so much fun.
They are all amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And I just loved, your presentation. It was straight talk. You could tell that it comes that the advice and the tactics and the strategies that you are sharing, it was so clear to me that it comes and it's born out of hard-earned experience. And, I feel like I have a really good radar for bull and for, that's sort of getting to an actionable advice point, but not quite getting there. And people can be informative and they can be entertaining and they can be likable, but I love it when that final element is there where I actually say, oh, this is good information and this is really coming from a very authentic, I know I can trust you because I can tell that you've proved it in your business. And I just really wanted to say that out loud and to anyone that has heard of you, thought of you, wondered about you, and encouraged them to follow you and to go get more of you. So,
Oh, LuAnn, thank you. I'm blushing right now. I really appreciate it. And I know I'm where I'm supposed to be because I just love helping young designers with their details. I promised myself that I would help as soon as I figured it out. And Lord knows it has been through some
yeah.
trials, blood, sweat, and tears. So if we can expedite the process for others, it raises the entire industry. So thank you for that recognition. It's very much appreciated.
Yeah, no, and you know me. You listen to the show. I
Yeah.
don't like just dole it out for no reason. Like I don't like I could just be like, and so let's start our conversation.
Which is what I expected. So now I'm really blushing. Thank you.
So I do. You know me. I'm a sucker for a smart lady and a smart guy. Like I just love when I'm in the presence of intelligent thought. That is like my love language. It's like, you're smart. I love you. And so just really high five. Okay. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. So the thing is, it's interesting because we had a little chat a month or so ago, and you had obviously I could have mined you for several conversations and talking points that we could have brought to the podcast, but I said to you, I've had an repeated request for a conversation on what actually constitutes billable hours. And I know there's a whole conversation about pricing and strategy, but in that weeds of what is billable. And, this is a gap for me. I don't know, slice idea. I have to ask a respected, intelligent designer who's got it locked down. And so when we were talking, I'm like, oh, that's you. Want to do this conversation?
Oh, yeah.
And
Pricing. It's a brutal
yeah.
topic.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk today. Pricing strategies and what constitute billable hours. So kick us off, Michelle. Where do we want to start this conversation?
Well, let me just tell you, LuAnn, everything that you do for the client is billable. Period.
Okay, well, there you go. All right, well, that's it. That's a wrap. Thanks, everybody.
End of podcast. Well, let's just start by saying that like everything is billable, and that's why billing by the hour is so difficult. But let's talk about like the initial phone call. Like that should be considered in your billable time, but how do you bill somebody who hasn't hired you? Okay.
Right.
But
Okay.
also it's the scheduling. It's once you have the client's signature, the shopping, the designing, the inspiration, the time you spend scrolling through Instagram should be billable. Okay.
Mm.
Because this is part of your design inspiration. It's as you're pulling these things together. When you're putting things into, PowerPoint, or you're dropping them into your project management software, whatever that is, that's all billable time. Technically, billable time is when you're cooking and you're thinking about the project, or God
Okay.
forbid, like, how do you bill somebody when you're in the shower and you think about them, right?
Right. Right.
You're like,
Right.
okay, this is a little weird, but I was thinking about you in the
And I
shower, so
came
I'm going
up
to
with
bill
the
you point.
best
No,
solution for this problem that we've all
yeah,
been having with the contractor, right?
exactly. So it's really everything. So whether you're writing an email, whether you are creating an invoice, whether you are creating the design presentation, whether you are driving back and forth portal to portal, that's billable time. The time that you're on site, of course, is billable, but a lot of times you're not comfortable billing the client for all of these things. So how do you go about doing that? It's a whip if you're doing it hourly. Because the better you get at your job, the fewer hours it takes to complete those tasks. Like, you're working yourself out.
Mm.
Um, but also, what about if you are sourcing and you have two kitchen renovations and you're sourcing for both of them at the same time? Like, how do you do that?
Right.
Okay, so I did that for 2 hours. It's 1 hour for one client and 1 hour for another. Yeah, but this other one had more problems, so I need to probably do an hour and a half over here, but 30 minutes doesn't feel right for that. So everything's billable, like everything. And it's for us at ML Interiors Group, we did that for a long time. But what also came up is, if we were charging by the hour, what how do you justify charging more than somebody's lawyer?
Right.
Like, their attorney. They're like, "Well, I don't even pay my actually, we had an attorney come in, and he was like, "I don't even bill that much. I'm not going to hire you." I was like, "Okay."
Well, and you know what's
Maybe you
funny
need to up
about
your
that is, like, my thought would be, well, whoever said designers are less expensive than attorneys? Like, where did that
Mhm.
come from, right? But I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, we're changing your home.
Right.
Yeah, we're
Right.
changing your home. But it's also people shopping around for the least expensive. We're
Right.
oftentimes looked at like a commodity.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what happens when you get the cheapest of anything.
Right.
It's not always the best solution.
No,
So
it's usually
so
not. Right.
yeah, everything that you do for the client is technically billable.
So it sounds like to me, and listen. We're talking this through live on air. We didn't do this ahead of
Mhm.
time, so I'm processing this just as any designer in the audience is listening. It sounds
Mhm.
like to me that where you're going to go is, because objectively, as a designer who has done exactly all the things that you've described, had that
Mhm.
absolute game changing, solution solving moment while they're jogging, that you're never not working. Basically, you're always advocating for your client. Your mind is
Mhm.
always spinning. So are you going to go to, if that's the case and you can't actually say, well, that hour jog, I came up with this idea, so I'm going to bill it to you, so we're going to go to flat fee? Or are you going to go to, no, LuAnn, if I, literally come up with the game changing, problem solving answer on a jog, I'm not going to write jogging 1 hour, but I'm going to log that hour. Where are you going to go with this? I'm curious.
Well, we've done both. So it was very difficult for us, my team and I, to count every single minute, because after that jog, I don't know, I might have come home and made dinner for my family.
Right.
And I wasn't really counting that time, because then I'd have to go and write it down and all of those things.
And you
So,
lose track of it 3 weeks later or 2 weeks later when you're
oh
sending the
my
billing
gosh,
out. Right. Okay.
absolutely. So it's almost impossible, in my opinion, to count every single minute, because it's just overwhelming. And like you said, you're always working. So We did. We flipped over to a lump sum, flat fee, value-based fees, whatever you want to talk about, whatever you want to call it. And I'm not kidding. I've got goosebumps. It has been a game changer for my firm because we still keep track of time. Don't get me wrong. We have to have data points in order to confirm that we're still being profitable by job. So we're doing the job costing, labor, and all of that sort of jazz. But we're not going to have to be as particular. So you can roll things together, but basically I love it as a business owner because I know where my cash flow is. I know my revenue predictions. I also know like, oh, November's going to be a little slow. We need to move something up in the pipeline and get that started because I need that lump sum.
Oh,
And
interesting.
then it makes it nice because you can literally do your financial analysis looking back, but you can do your financial planning looking forward. So, plus, oh my gosh, there's so much less paperwork.
Yeah.
Like, I used to hate doing the invoicing just with the time tracking. And then even when I outsourced my accounting, I still had a lot of paperwork to do. And technically that's billable too. So it's like, okay, Mr. Miss Client, here's the deal. It just took me an hour and a half to get all my time tracking done. I'm billing you for it.
Right. So
And then the push.
okay. So I want to talk about how somebody can effectively come up with the strategies to do these fees so that you are encompassing all of this extra time. But is there any validity to actually, what if somebody is 100% committed to time tracking and hourly billing because maybe they are highly detail orientated and they flip the timer on and they flip the timer off? Is there a legit list of what is accepted in the industry as billable time versus no? Or do you actually, aside from the hour jogging, but do you actually say no? If you're sitting at your desk and whether you're creating invoices or you're doing CAD drawings or you're putting together a design plan or you're having a consult call, all of that should be billed. Is there no delineation in it?
So I think it's going to depend on the level of service that you're providing and the amount of your hourly rate. So there's not an industry standard that says X, Y, or Z. It's the Wild West out here still, because everybody does it a little bit differently. If you are adamant about working hourly, then I would literally suggest that yes, you do bill for everything, but on the other hand, and here I am talking out of both sides of my mouth, if you're charging enough per hour, some of those little details can slip through. Okay. Because if you're charging $300 an hour, you don't have to be a jerk about it
Right.
and be that particular, because then it's also going to be along the lines of you're doing the right thing for your client.
Right.
But don't do the wrong thing for yourself. So I think that there's a fine balance because oftentimes what I see when I'm talking to these interior designers, it's like they feel bad. What do you mean you feel bad charging them that much?
Right.
Okay. You have to separate yourself as the individual business owner from the business owner. So like we were talking about earlier, is like or offline, is like you have different hats that you have to wear. You're the designer and you're the CEO. So the CEO is going to tell the designer who feels bad, don't feel bad. This is a business.
Right.
So if it takes you 6 hours to find the right sofa, it takes you 6 hours to find the right sofa because maybe it takes you 15 minutes to find the right rug. So you're going to charge them 15 minutes, but you're not going to charge them 6 hours.
Right.
It's not necessarily congruent with a profitable business. So it's just going to be, it could be how you present it. They could just be design time, flat, my design time for this month was X number of dollars. But that also brings me up, LuAnn, and I'm going to kind of go down a little bit of a bunny trail, is if you're billing after the work has been done, you are working at a deficit. So if you are going to be paid by the hour, my suggestion would be getting a retainer or whatever you want to call it, getting a chunk of change and then working into that.
Right.
Because it's not the bank of Michelle.
Right, right. That's where, I love that it's so funny because I don't know where recently I heard something about somebody saying, I don't like the idea of selling a block of hours. And they were taking some exception to the connotation of it, right? That it didn't
Mm-hmm.
seem, I want to just almost say elegant, right? And
Right.
the funny thing is when you call it a retainer or a block of hours, it's the same blasted thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you
It,
know,
it just sounds fancier.
yeah, it just and that just hit me when you said retainer. I'm like, oh well, that's a pretty way to say it if you have a problem with
Mm-hmm.
saying a block of hours, right?
Yeah.
So here I require that we have a retainer of 20 hours in house, and
Mm-hmm.
when we get down to 5, I'll be sending you an invoice for another 20, another retainer for 20,
Absolutely.
right? So and it's
Mm-hmm.
funny because I hear you, Michelle. Like it that when you said it took you 6 hours to find the rug but 15 minutes to find the lamp or whatever, you're 100%
Right.
right. Like, you cannot know if it will take 6 hours for that. It would, and if somebody would feel like, well, 3 for each is right, well, okay, but it's, or 3.5 for each is right, well, okay, that's still 7 hours by the time you do 1 hour for that rug and
Yeah.
6 hours for that. So it is almost a spin in your head. It's the story in your head that you're telling yourself. And so that's
Oh,
one point that I
yeah.
wanted to acknowledge that you made and I thought was good. And then the other point was, I think the first time somebody asked me about this billable hours question, I remember thinking, I have no idea what's technically billable. Like, I literally don't know. I've never had to know that. It's
Mm-hmm.
never really come up, blah, blah, blah. But I remember thinking on it and thinking to myself, well, what is the difference if I'm doing a paperwork for you, or I'm meeting a contractor, or I'm at a showroom looking for fabric? Like, what if I'm doing anything that's moving your project along, why is there a delineation on a designer's mind between what's billable and not billable? And I remember thinking, well, I guess I just don't get it, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
if I'm sitting there doing 3 hours worth of invoicing for your job, and somebody wants to
Right.
say, like, and I don't know if that's a typical something that somebody would say, oh, that's not billable. I don't really know what the things are that people say aren't billable. But in my brain, I'd be like, well, why? Because I wouldn't have to do that 3 hours if you weren't my client.
Exactly.
It wouldn't be on my
Exactly.
plate to do,
And
right?
a lot of it just comes down to it just comes down to what you said before, the stories we tell ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
What are some
we're
of the
not.
things, Michelle? I sorry to talk over you there, but I'm just
Oh,
curious.
good.
What are some of the things there that, like, traditional way of thinking? Like, I hear you. I love your perspective. I expected you to go, oh, LuAnn, these 5 activities are not billable and these 5 are. I really expected that, okay? But you didn't do that. You have a different perspective on it, and I love it. To me, it's a higher view perspective, and it's a much more profitable one, and it makes more logical sense to me. But knowing your experience, you say you're sitting at someone else's presentation and they're going to say, these 3 things are not billable. Pick 3 things for me that is typically the industry would say is not a billable activity.
I would say the administrative, like billing paperwork
Okay.
aspect of it is not would not be perceived as billable. Potentially emails and texts and back and forth
Okay.
would not be billable. And then maybe some of the problem solving, like
Okay.
in
Okay.
regards to like something shows up damaged.
Okay. 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 So I get that, right? I've had that
Hmm.
discussion with designers, and then
Hmm.
and I'm like, no, that has to be billable. Like, that has to be
Right.
billable. That has to be right. Okay. So those are 3. I just wanted to sink my teeth into 3 things to just really kind of wrap around to your counter perspective of it's all billable. And when
Right.
you say that, and I think about those 3 areas, I also agree. And to me, it also lines up. I'm curious where you stand on this. And I know that this is all over like you said, it's the Wild West. I know that people I love and respect do think one way, and people I love and respect will have a different opinion on this. But
Hmm.
when someone says to me, my billable rate is, $300 an hour, but my junior is $125 an hour, I don't
Right.
get why we bill out the junior at 125. And like I said, there are people that I love and respect that have a good explanation for it. And I, at the end of it, go, I hear you, but I wouldn't do it that way, because
Mm-hmm.
the way I process it is if I literally September 1st do not have a junior, I am a solo, and I'm going to do the
Mm-hmm.
X amount of work for the month of September. Every single thing that I think is billable, I'm going to bill for. And then October 1st, I have a junior, and I'm going to task them with 40% of the activities that I was previously doing. And of those 40% of activities I was previously doing, all of them fall into my billable calendar, my billable
Mm-hmm.
category. What, I just made $50 less an hour because I hired an employee? Like the
Right.
month before, I was happy to send those out at 300, but this month they go out at 150. Like, that's ridiculous to me. And to me,
I-
if I was going to do it and I was going to charge my 300, then I'm going to charge my 300 for Sally, who comes in and works for me to do it. Right? Like,
Amen.
that just seems
I mean,
logical to me.
I think a lot of designers, myself included, because I used to do that.
Okay,
It's funny
okay.
that you bring that up. I was like, okay, yep. But then I, re- I grew up a little bit more and looked at it from the perspective that you just described. It's like, if they're approving $300, why am I giving a $150 discount when they
Right.
already approved it? So
Or the
I
new,
think
even if it's a new
a lot,
customer, like a new client, like last month's client was
absolutely.
fine for me to bill for sourcing at the design store at $300 an hour, but this month's client,
Mhm.
I got to only bill 150 because I have Sally doing it. I
It's
just don't get it.
absolutely, that goes back to people pleasing.
Yeah.
That's probably the designer hat and not the CEO hat.
Well, and it's
Like, I
also
can tell you personally, I wasn't secure enough,
mm,
and I thought I was doing my clients a favor by charging them less. So that was my designer hat.
mm,
It wasn't the business owner CEO hat
right,
looking at it and saying, "You ding dong, that
right,
doesn't make sense. You're giving money away."
right. No, like
But it could work for some people. Like you said, there's other individuals, and I think larger firms, that's what they do.
yeah. Right. No, I know. Like, listen, if this were a panel discussion and we had,
Hmm.
4 or 5 of your peers, and I'm not, this is the only truth of this. I'm just like, this is what I'm
Amen.
thinking. Like, that's all
Uh-huh.
I don't do this for a living. It just seems to me that, and what I often do, Michelle, is I process it from the standpoint as the consumer, because I'm not a designer. And
Right.
so I'm thinking to myself, if, would I love a break? Yeah. But to your point, if I'm the same consumer for the month of September and your same consumer client in the month of October,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
would be like, well, that's great. I got a break, but why is it cheaper this month? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Is the service less?
yeah, like, and I guess too, where I could almost hear somebody in the audience saying, right, but LuAnn, my junior is going to do it at 3 times a slower pace than I would do it at. And so therefore it might take me an hour to do with my experience and them 3 hours. So it ends up actually costing the consumer 450 instead of 300.
Mm.
So they're already over, paying more. And my brain is just like, yes, but just to your earlier point, there have to be things that your junior is going to do faster than you, right?
Hmm.
To me, it all washes out.
I think so. And also, like, as the business owner, Luann, the paperwork was a brutal. Like,
Right.
it was like I had to figure out, okay, so she worked this many hours, I worked this many hours, and honestly, the lazy factor, it's coined efficiently lazy. We just said
I
everybody
love it.
everybody's the same. Like, forget it. All of this moving
Yeah.
around does not make sense.
See, and
And you're right. My team is a lot faster at things than I was.
well, that's the thing. Like, there's going to be some things they're faster at, some things that they're slower at. And I would also even say, I could see as somebody that maybe this is the first month I take on an employee and I'm going to start to have them do billable activities. I could see being a rational, respectful, human person to my clients and thinking, all right, until I get the lay of the land with this new hire, let me task them with billable things that I expect them to do at a similar rate than me. And if their skill set, if I have no idea if they know my design aesthetic yet, maybe I'm not sending them on the hunt for the perfect chandelier just yet. You know what I mean? But, running a thing back and forth to the design store, or running a thing back and forth to the jobs. I mean, our cars all go 60 miles an hour. We all walk the same, just get in and get out and deliver the crap.
Pay the same for gas.
Yeah. And so anyway, okay. And then the other part of that is that it's, as a consumer, is I don't know that I'm coming into it expecting, if you tell me this is the rate, that's the rate. I'm not, I don't know all the nuances of this, and it doesn't matter. And I'm not going to sit here and say, and what are you going to do, and what is your junior going to do? You're just going to get my job done. I'm not sitting there at the consult or at the signing of the agreement and literally saying to myself, are you going to pick every piece of fabric? Are you going to deliver every sample to the job site? I'm just you're getting my job done. That's what I don't care how it gets done in the background, who gets tasked with it.
But you're a sophisticated consumer, LuAnn.
Yeah.
A lot of times, as we begin our businesses as interior designers, we are not catering to a sophisticated client because we are not being sophisticated in our business practices to train those clients to either accept our terms or walk away. Because we feel, and I'm speaking of myself, 10 years ago, we feel like we have to serve everybody.
Yes.
And therefore, we have to bend down and lower our standards to meet theirs, when instead we should be raising our standards and elevating the clients that we serve. So not everybody hires you. And what I teach, one of the things I think is really important is you need to continue pushing until you start hearing some no's. Right. Literally, when people start saying no, you've hit your sweet spot.
Right.
And you are ruling out some of the clients that are going to drag you down, because those unsophisticated clients are the ones that are just the ones you hear about in all the forums on Facebook. This client was just making me crazy. So yes, it goes back to the stories we tell ourselves. I haven't been doing this enough. I can't be charging that much. I'm not good enough, or whatever. All those BS stories in your head.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that line. When you start hearing some no's, that's when you know you're starting to hit your sweet spot. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome, Michelle.
But we're afraid to hear no.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it is true. And I hear you with that I am the consumer, that whatever profession I'm coming to you because I expect you to handle it. That is the thing, right? And I get that. It's
it's because professionals hire professionals.
Exactly.
I do not go to get my oil changed and my hair done at the same place. Right?
Exactly.
So
it's
you
funny
go
because
to the professional to get it done.
Yeah.
And therefore you have expectations of that level of professionalism. So as designers, we have to rise up to that and own it.
Right. And the nuance that you're making in there, and I'm high-fiving you on, is if and until you come to it as the designer with your rules of the road on the way this is going to happen, that's when you will get the clients that do that, because you're going to have to say no, and people are going to say no to you for that period of time when you are bending your rule. Oh, okay, well, yes, you're right. If I'm not going to do the work, I should bill at a different rate. Or yes, you're right, I shouldn't bill for that because it took too long. Yes, you're right. It's no. We don't ask our client our opinion on how we do stuff. That's not what we're, right? We share how we do things, but we're sharing for education, and we're sharing so they understand the process, not for an opinion and a critique on how it's getting done.
And you just definitely nailed it, hit the nail on the head. We have to educate our clients before the process starts.
Right.
Heck, the whole process leading up to the contract being signed is educational about how many moving parts there are, how many different areas, where do you charge your fees? How do you charge? And the fact is that it's not rainbows and fairy dust and poof, you have a beautiful room. Like we don't go to commercial and everything's installed. So educating the client so they understand how laborious this really is imperative when you tell them how much it's going to cost them.
Right.
Because I think most of the time the clients are, generally people are good, right? There are a few jerks here and there, fine. But for the most part, they just don't understand. And therefore they start questioning because it hasn't been explained. And then you feel defensive and then you lower your rates and you shave off this, that, and the other and whatnot, where a lot of it could have been prevented if you walk them through an educational process on the front end and then continue to remind them of that educational nuggets as you go along. Because what we do looks like magic.
Right.
But there's a lot that goes on behind the curtain.
Right. And that last line right there, that's critical, because when somebody is expecting you to do something and they think that it's overpriced at what you're doing, or the value that they're not, it's not worth what you're charging to do, it's, in my experience, it's always because they have no concept into what goes into what you're doing, that
Absolutely.
They don't understand the depth. And that part is okay for a consumer, but to your point, it's up to us to educate them. I have that in the window treatment industry as well. That's been my experience. I used that line earlier. Whoever said lawyers are more, should be, more expensive. And that is a little flip, right? Because I think that, to some extent, most people would think a lawyer is going to be more expensive. I don't know why, though. What you do is probably 10 times harder. But in my career in window treatments, I can't tell you the number of times somebody has said to me, my God, the window didn't cost that much when I replaced the window. And that I'm really like, I'm sorry, that's made on an assembly line in a factory. They literally will crank out 200 in an hour. Why in the world would you think this handmade Roman shade with this fine fabric, this lining, this trim applied to it is going to be less expensive than a factory-built assembly line product? Mrs. Customer.
Yeah,
now,
just the
that's my
perception.
inside voice. I don't say it that way, but that's exactly what I end up saying in a nice way. Like, stop. But and that's where I'm like, I'm being crazy. But my point is, that's my moment to educate them. And that's what I've always taken. That I was, oh, well, let me explain to you why, some of the reasons why this Roman shade is twice as expensive as your window it actually costs, because the Roman shade is handmade. There is a man or a woman sitting at a table, and the fabric, I've gone back and forth to your house 3 times for us to pick the perfect fabric, and that fabric is milled, and it's, blah, blah, blah. Like, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, yeah, that was weird that I thought the window should be more expensive. Okay. 1 Roman shade, please.
Yeah, it's not measured by the square foot in pricing.
Right? It's just crazy, right? But that's that key right there, that education key. Because if I just said, because here's the analogy to a lesser experienced, a designer who is not standing in their Sandra Funk space, right, that is not willing to flip the story in their head, in that moment, that designer is saying, oh, okay, right, so your window was $350 and this is $800. Well, all right, well, I could probably do it for $5. I mean, and if you want to do a wood blind, we could definitely do it for the $325, knowing that the Roman shade is the answer, knowing that you just spent hours designing the Roman shade, knowing all these things. You see, that's the moment that you're talking about when you're going to hear some no's, because I can go into that whole explanation of why the Roman shade is 2.5 times more than the window was. And when somebody says, well, that's great, LuAnn, but I still don't want to pay more than my window, then I go, okay, that's fine. See ya. Right?
Wayfair.com.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's the analogy, right? Of whether it's you're pricing a whole room or you're pricing a refresh or you're pricing a consult, even a consult. If you're going to charge $350 for a consult and somebody wants to say, "Oh my goodness, I don't even know you yet. Why would there be $350?" Instead of just being like, "Well, okay, I could do it for two," or, "Oh, well, this is how it's done." It's like, "Well, why don't you share with them all the goodness they're going to get in that hour and a half for $350?" Right?
Yes.
I'm an
It's all
experienced interior
education.
designer, right? I'm going to come in, I'm going to, word vomit on you every idea I have for an hour and a half.
Hmm.
You can write a book about it and go to Home Depot and execute if you want. But you got professional advice, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of it just comes down to our industry just holding ourselves at the value our services are.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes what I've seen is that it's mostly women, and we go into business and the company bears our name. Okay.
Yeah.
So for me, it used to be Michelle Lynn Interiors Group. Now we're doing business as ML Interiors Group. But when it's Michelle Lynn, it's like, then that's me,
Mm.
right? That's me. And I'm charging what I'm worth. And then we have the story saying, you're not worth that much. You're not worth that much. You're not worth that
Mm.
much. It's not you, babe. It is not
Right.
you. First of all, you're a child of God and you are worth like infinity.
Right.
But the hourly amount that you're charging is for the service. It is not for you. So separating that again
Mm.
is imperative, because all those BS stories in our head and those little voices that tell us we're not good enough or whatever the case may be. So I think that separating the two also helps to validate the amount that we're charging, because we change people's lives.
You do.
I mean, we create spaces where people begin and end their day, and then they go out into the world and into battle, but they can come home into a safe spot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we make a home feel like a hug.
Right.
How do you put a price on that?
Right.
How do you put a price
Right.
on that?
Right.
So getting out of our minds and stepping into that CEO role and realizing this is a business, it's not a charity.
Right.
Like, just owning it.
It's
And it
true.
takes a while. It's a lot of internal work.
That is the crux of it, Michelle, is that
Hmm.
you can listen to 15,000 hours of podcasts that talk about understanding your value, charging your value, standing in your space, all of the things. But if you haven't and won't do the internal work to turn
Hmm.
the flip the switch on, this is a business and I objectively provide a service in this business, and this is
Hmm.
what this service is worth, you're not going to get there. You're just not going to get there. You're always going to struggle to charge, because, to your point, you're charging for you personally as a person, as opposed to you objectively as what you're delivering. And I believe,
Hmm.
like you said, you personally as a person are actually worth more. Like, you actually are worth more. Your
Yeah.
individual, every experience you've had in your entire life makes you uniquely qualified to deliver a room that, with all the same, like I've said it one time 100 years ago on the show, if I gave you, Michelle, the exact same room, and 5 other designers the exact same room, and even if I gave you the same lamps, the same rugs, the same sofas, you'd all put together a different room. You would. You'd
Yep.
have the sofa in a
Hmm.
different spot. Like, there's certain anchor things, like, there's good design, right? But
Right.
you'd have it assembled differently, because you are uniquely everything you are as a total person. And that is always worth more. The uniqueness is always worth more, right?
I
But
think that that's it. Once you own your own uniqueness, or my own weirdness,
right,
it's so much more freedom.
right, right, right.
So we don't have to compare ourselves to Debbie Designer, who's been in business for so many years, or, Susie Sweet, who has a perfect Instagram feed, or anything like that. It's all about our individuality, because people will hire the ones they like
Right.
and trust.
And yes, and trust. And how, 100%. I'm glad you added "and trust," because trust is earned when you stand across the table from me and you convey to
Hmm.
me that you know what you're doing and what you're worth. right? And
Oh,
when I say
LuAnn,
know
we've
what you're
had
doing,
people tell us that they're paying us too much. I've had people say, Michelle, I'm paying you more than I expected to pay. I'm paying you more than I want to pay, but I know you guys will get it done well
right,
on, and on budget. Now I can't promise on time as much anymore, but
right. That's a wild card.
we used to be able to be on time all the time, but
Right, right.
yeah,
No,
it's amazing.
yeah, yeah. And
And
it's,
I
and
pinch myself.
yes, and congratulations. I'm glad you're hearing that because that's exciting. And that's when you know that you are, and when I said, that when I look across the table with you and the trust is earned when I know you know what you're worth, what it means to me is that you're standing there looking back at me saying, "I got this.
Mm-hmm.
That is it." It's like I got to have that feeling of I got this. It's funny. I just did an Instagram live recently with Sarah Brennan. And Sarah Brennan is the process queen, right? Like this kid has just systemized her business like no other and has it's so built out and so bump this happens bump, and I admire her so much. And she teaches process leads to profits at LuAnn University. And
Yeah.
so we were talking about it on Instagram, and it was so funny because she said how she recently this summer was interviewing a landscape firm. And I guess it was to have
Mm.
some plantings, and so probably a landscape architecture firm. And she said, here the guy is there and blah, blah, blah. And she's saying, well, how does the process work? And he's looking at her and, she's like, she said, 2-3 questions into it. And I realized he has no process. Like he's going to get it done. Right?
Yeah.
He's in business. He gets it done. But she just said, knowing now how a business is run and what it takes to run a business and doing the things according to process so that I know that balls don't get dropped and deadlines are met and all the things. I know the only way that happens is if you have a documented process. And when I see it in somebody's face and in their answers that they don't, I can't give them my money. And it made me realize I have unconsciously, like WindowWorks has been process driven from day one. It was a franchise, for crying out loud. You can't get more process driven than that, right?
Amen.
And so I have had that experience, and I think that's why I've always been so clear cut on it. It's like and why I've always been the person on the show that says, I'm coming to you as a professional. It's like, when she said it, I was like, oh. And when you said it a few moments ago, you're a sophisticated consumer. It's like, well, the thing is, because I know what it takes to run a business. And if I have my fourth question, I can tell you have no idea, then I can't do this with you. I don't care how good your design is.
Did they get lucky or are they good?
Well, and that's the thing. Like Vinny has a saying, even a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and again, right? And so,
yep.
And so the thing is, what I know is that you can manage to stay in business for 10, 20, 30, 40 years and never really have developed your processes to the point that you are running a well-oiled machine. I know that because there's drive, there's grit, you do have a process, even though it's not documented. You do have a process, but by it not being, but by it not being documented, that's when you get up at 3:00 in the morning and go, oh my God, did I tell the tile guy the herringbone face is left? Right? Like that's what you can still get it done. It's not, but when you are a process-driven company and you interview another one, you can tell when they're not. And I think that when you are that's why we say, and you said earlier, when you start to do better work in a more organized fashion, your clients become people who appreciate that, don't question you, and they have trust in you. And it's because they can sniff you out too. Right. And when they
and it's the energy that you send out.
Right.
I mean,
that's what I'm saying. You could
up,
sniff it out.
You've got that.
Yep.
It's an energetic field, like it attracts the right people.
Right. Right.
I can tell you that about dating too. Before I met my husband.
But that's
an energetic field. They know when you're desperate.
But that's true, right? Isn't that true? Isn't that true? Even in a human interaction, you get a whole vibe. Right? You get a whole vibe. This is a whiny person. This is a positive person. This is a person that's, a glass is half full person. You get the whole vibe. And that's, I think, the crux of when you absolutely know that you deliver a good process, and
Hmm.
product, then you give off the vibe of this is what I do and this is what it costs and I'll get it done.
Yep. And LuAnn, that's so in my paid program, the Interior Design Business Bakery, it is amazing how many, mostly women, but how many designers, how many have that aha moment. And even though you're scared, you still slide that contract across the table and knowing that it's the most you've ever asked for and you just tripled your fees, but you do it anyway because you know that your processes are solid.
Right.
And what that does is you were talking about waking up at 3 in the morning and everything, that you become a business owner instead of a business operator.
Right.
And therefore you can have a life outside of your business.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we started our businesses for?
Exactly. Exactly. What is that called again? Your paid program?
It's the Interior Design Business Bakery. It's a
Very
one
cool.
year long mentorship. Yeah, it's amazing. It's because my company, my ML Interiors group, runs itself. I was blessed enough to be able to create this other business to help other designers move forward through the same processes that I finally figured out.
I love it.
And it has been a game changer.
And is it, Michelle, is it a one on one? Is it a group coaching? Tell us a little bit about it.
So thanks, LuAnn. I appreciate that. So it's a 1 year long program. It is a group program, but we have master coaches. We meet once a week. It's still very high touch.
Mm.
The experience is fantastic. We have a private Facebook group that is very active, but it's online and it's also on Zoom. So the master coaches rotate through. I teach once a month, or I have office hours once a month where we get some one on one time together within the group. Because what happens is, and I don't even do one on one coaching anymore because I feel like I do a disservice to the group who learns from others.
Yes, 100%. We all learn in the that's why LuAnn University classes
Yes.
are live taught because when Sally asks a question, you just learned something. You didn't even know to ask the question, but you just learned
Exactly.
something, right?
And then it probably arises next week and you're like, "Oh, I know what to do because I just heard about that." So yeah, there's a lot of really great interaction. And
Mm.
then the cool thing is, LuAnn, is that I still learn from my students often.
Yeah, yeah, me
So when
too.
I'm on there, I'm like, "Oh, that's a great idea. I love how you're doing that."
Right,
And sometimes I'll go implement it myself and other times I just file it in the back of my head to share with others.
right.
But it's I am just tickled at how well this has changed so many people's lives, and I love doing it.
Oh my goodness.
Love it.
And is it
Yeah.
it's fun now I'm going to do all my curiosity right here with everybody because I know they're thinking the same thing. So is it the type of thing that you can join at any time or is it like the interior design standard where you have to, get in twice a year? Like how do you do that?
Right. No, we have a rolling enrollment. You could join tomorrow, you get all of the information immediately, and then you can start hopping on the calls.
Wow.
And then the way it basically works is like the first 90 days, you're implementing, you're learning a lot of things. It's like taking a drink from a fire hose.
Mm,
And you can jump into the pricing module immediately. Like I literally have exactly how I do my pricing.
mm,
Um, and my pricing sheet that my team uses. So you can do the pricing module or you can do the process module. Like there's everything. I suggest you start at the beginning, but if you need to have pricing updated and how to implement it, then you can go back and do the rest of it.
nice.
So you hop on, you get what you need, and then we have what's called the frosting because we have the key ingredients and then we have the frosting. So literally when I know, isn't that funny? Literally when we're on calls, if something comes up that I did not include in the key ingredients because it is like taking a drink from a fire hose, I will immediately or within a couple days upload it into the frosting section if
Mm,
we already have it created. So,
nice.
like here's an example of construction documents. Here's an example of job descriptions. Here's an example of how to fire a client diplomatically.
Wow.
So it's I wish I would have had this when I started my business.
Right.
And
Yes.
I think my heart is I think it's what you call baby designers. Um, Anybody under 300,000, you
Okay.
know,
I was going to
is
ask you
just
who's
my
the
sweet spot.
ideal designer client for this. So under
Oh,
300,000 revenue. Yes.
yeah, give or take.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
for the
yeah, yeah.
most part,
Nothing's
or maybe
finite.
you've been making money, but you've been up at 3 in the morning and not sure how to
Right.
keep the doors open.
Right, 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 right.
So yeah, love,
Wow.
love, love it. I know the Lord has me where I'm supposed to be, because it is just such a blessing to interact with these individuals, and the friendships that I see developing. So fun.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's the same with us with whether it's a Power Talk Friday experience or LuAnn University or LuAnn
Yes.
Live experience. I always say to everybody, come for the information, but the icing on the cake, to your point, is the friendships. It's the collaborations that you make that 2 weeks, 2 months, 3 years from now, that you can still call your colleague and say, this just happened. How do you get around this? Or how do you solve this? Or blah, blah, blah. Or this just happened. It was amazing. I need somebody to cheerlead for me because nobody in my family understands what a big deal this is.
Nobody understands like other designers. But
Exactly.
I will say, LuAnn, just you have opened the door. You kicked the doors open for people like me to walk through.
Aw.
So, you are such a leader in this industry that it's just such a blessing that we have enough coaches around now to help, because I'm not for everybody. I don't need everybody. Find a coach. So if you guys are listening, the audience, find a coach, find a
Right.
program, do something.
100%.
Don't be out there on an island yourself. There's somebody for everybody. Just like I tell designers, community over competition. There's a lot of ugly houses. Like,
There's a lot of ugly houses.
And same thing with coaches. Like, there's enough of us out there. Go find who you resonate with.
Yeah, it's so true. It's funny because so many coaches have sprouted up in the industry over the last 6 years that I've been doing the podcast. And it's funny because every once in a while, someone will say something about that aspect to me in like a derogatory way.
Yeah.
And, and I do like an exorcist head spin on that. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, everybody and their brother's a coach now, like something like that. And I just, kind of look and I think to myself, so does that just means to me that you need to do a little homework to see who really feels like a fit for you, whose voice do you hear, who resonates with you, because the alternative is 10 years ago when there was no place to get help. So this is a bad thing? Like, I don't see it as a bad thing. And you know what? Yes. Does that mean that everyone that puts the plan in the ground and says, I now can coach interior designers, does that mean everybody is actually a good coach? No, it does not. Okay. I'm not saying everyone is, but the fact is that I would rather have the choice of 20 and maybe 18 are proficient to do it and worry about discovering the 2 who are not, than have the choice of 2 and not really jiving with either of them, or the choice of 0, right? Like, more is more help is more help and I like, and for me, I love meeting each of you guys. And that's like why I did share in the beginning. I had the one presentation with you, and I've never been a part of your program. That's one time we've met each other. We don't have a history of years or whatever. But my takeaway from that one presentation was, okay, what you spoke about in that day, I knew you knew what you were talking about, and you owned the information you were giving, and I could tell it came from heart and experience. And that, to me, was the first litmus test. I was like, okay, this is a smart lady. I will, let's take the next step. Let's have a conversation on the show. And you just did it to me again. So very impressed. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I just, it just goes back to serving. It goes back to serving, because I wish I would have had a me when I was going through my process. I literally would pick up the phone or talk to designers and ask them questions, and nobody would share. So the secrecy is ridiculous. I said, hell to heck with this. I'm going to blow the doors off of it and tell everybody exactly how I did it when I figured it out. And LuAnn, I think most of the time the reason why they didn't want to share is because they didn't know what they were doing.
They didn't know 100%. And the ones who did know, if you did know, there was no climate of sharing. There was no, you know what I'm saying? So it was like, well, okay, I'm the one of 10 designers that I know that has figured it out. So now I'm going to sit here and teach it to you. Like, I'm busy running my business. And so I love that individuals like yourself that have the experience of doing the design work on the ground, you, Sandra Funk, Claire Jefford, Terry Taylor. I mean, my God, I'm going to leave people out, and there's everybody that's amazing at it. You know what I'm saying? But that have now now done what you said. Turn around and say, no, okay, I'm going to open my doors. I'm going to teach you how it's done.
Time to give back.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I know that, it's the whole teaching of the things that the schools are not able to address. And then all the designers who are qualified and capable that don't even haven't had the experience of a design education to begin with. I mean, look, I know that what's so funny is I've had people say, well, what do you think about designers that are designing that don't have interior design school? And like, it's usually at a private, it's a private conversation at a live event or something. And they'll be like, what do you really think of that? And I'm like, well, since there was no window treatment school, I'm pretty sure I'm fine with it. Because you're not going to tell me I'm not a window treatment professional that knows, an encyclopedic knowledge of window treatments because there was no window treatment school, right? Now,
exactly.
Am I all in favor of the design schools? 100%. Why do you have to learn the hard way all the things that you can pay a 4-year degree or 2-year degree to learn? But if somebody gets there and they figured it out and now they hire somebody that does CAD because they are not qualified, or hire somebody that does this because they didn't learn it, I'm sorry, yes, that's still legit. I'm good with you right there. You know what I'm saying?
Outsource is fine. Absolutely. And so I'm going to give myself a gratuitous plug because I'm in the process of creating a program for those individuals who just want to know enough, like, of the vernacular, of the history, of the styles, of the use of colors and stuff like that. We're calling it design from scratch because not everybody has the time, if it's a second or third career, to go back to school. So if this is what you need to feel confident, because I'm the ready fire aim person, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to do this, and then I kind of figure it out.
That's
Well, like Debbie, who works for me, she's much more meticulous, and she went to community college so she could learn some of the terms to be more confident and so forth. So everybody has their own path,
Right.
and none of them are wrong.
100%. That's
As long as
really
you're
what
serving
I'm
the client
saying
with
in a
integrity.
nutshell there. Like, I all respect all day long, either way you come to it. My thing is, you don't pretend to know something you don't. I don't care if you went to school or you didn't. That's crazy pants, right?
Amen.
But, and if you're the type of person that feels more secure by having like even your crash course, right, as opposed to a 2 or 4-year degree, all day long, go do you, right? Go do you. I love it. I love it. Oh my goodness. So now that we, how do they find out about this amazing program?
Well, thank you. So I am all over Instagram at Designed for the Creative Mind, also on Facebook, same thing. And in fact, we have a private it's a private Facebook group, but it is for interior designers. It's called the Interior Designers Business Launchpad. I actually host 5-day workshops in there for free. I go live once a week, but designedforthecreativemind.com is the hub for everything, because I have a summit, I have a podcast, I have the workshops, I have the paid program, and all the fun things that is just, serving the interior design community. And then legitimately, I'm still running mlinteriorsgroup.com.
Nice.
And that's ML Interiors Group on Instagram and all over the place too.
Nice. Love it. I love it. You know what?
Yeah.
Our conversation went down a different road than I originally thought it might, but I loved it. Hopefully our colleagues will as well. Like I said, I just have appreciation when I know that when you're sharing from hard-earned experience and it comes through what it is, you know what it is? It's the before and after. I can pick up in somebody when they understand, before I did that, I made that mistake. And after, here's the result of pushing through and making the correction. And here's the reward of it. That I can always spot in somebody. And that is the spot that I love to pick apart, because that to me is the powerful message to the person that's still sitting in the before. It's, okay, she's gone through the other side. Like, I just have to trust this process and trust the others before me to just plow through. So I love that. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, LuAnn. That's been my pleasure.
So, were you like me and expecting a quote-unquote list of billable activities? Right? Things that you mentally and physically check off as you go about your week, billable, not billable, right? And who knows who's right, right? I mean, we know though that the moment you get a new project, you start working on it immediately, even if it's just mentally, right? You do technically start working on that project. And Michelle says that most everything that you do is part of the design process and therefore it's billable. This includes your time shopping, designing, phone calls, making an invoice, even scrolling Instagram for research. And I don't know, maybe it feels funny billing for some of these things, but there's an important thing that Michelle said that as the CEO, you wear one hat and you have to wear that hat as the business owner, right? And sometimes you have the designer hat on, but you must actively spend time with that CEO business owner hat on so that you can make clear decisions. And I think that's when you start to think about what she's saying and how much sense it makes. Okay. So you may be thinking though, but when I get a new project, I'm planning it in my mind 24 hours a day. How does that work? Do I charge them for when I'm cooking dinner and thinking about my client's kitchen? Obviously, sometimes it's impossible to count every single minute. But that's why Michelle has decided for her and those that she teaches that flat fee makes sense. There's others that believe this. Sandra Funk has gone to flat fee. So, Michelle has done it because of the many benefits that she sees to her business. She says it's easier to do her financial planning when looking forward, her financial analysis looking back. She said that it makes it easier for her to predict revenue and cash flow. And this way of charging her clients has worked best for her and her clients. Okay. So the thing is, no matter which way you decide to charge, if you have conflicting or bad feelings about charging your value, understand that billing and pricing is deeper than just these numbers, whether you do it flat or hourly, right? It goes back to the stories we tell ourselves. You know, the ones, I haven't been doing this long enough to charge that much, or I don't feel like I'm worth that amount. This is when you have to put that CEO hat on and say, no, this is my business. This is my expertise. This is what I have to charge in order to be profitable. I'm worth it. Move on. Like Terry Taylor says, pass the salt, right? It's time to do this. It's time to do this internal work if that's what you need to do so that you understand that you are entitled to and that you deserve to charge for all of this mental, emotional, energy, creative energy that you put into these projects that you put out into the world that change people's lives, right? And if you've been listening to the show, you know that lately I've been referencing Andrea Labrosa's episode because it just seems to keep coming up about knowing your worth and charging it. So if you happen to miss that one in the last, month or two, we'll put that link in the notes as well. It's another place to do that, that searching yourself for what are the obstacles in the stories that you're telling that prevent you from charging in the way that you know you should charge. Okay? All right. So this is the internal work, but there's also always what I always talk about. It's educating your clients. Some clients honestly don't understand why they're being charged, quote unquote, so much. They don't know the depth of what you do and the expertise that what goes on behind closed doors. Michelle advises, and I agree with her, educate them on the process and how you charge and what you charge before the contract is signed. What I love about what Michelle tells you to do, and not to do, I should say, is something that she was guilty of doing when she first started, is not to lower your standards to meet your client's standards, right? That's like I always say to you, I'm not in charge of your pocketbook, right? Don't save your clients' money. Clients don't have an opinion on how you conduct your business. It is what it is. You aren't going to get every single client, and that's actually fine. It is not the goal to get every single client. It just isn't, okay? So another great tip she gives us is to keep pushing until you hear the word no, because that's when you find your sweet spot. This is when you weed out those clients who drag you down and find the ones who raise you up and elevate you, and that inside voice of yours who wears the CEO's hat and stands by you and what you know you're worth, right? Clients feel your energy. Don't ever forget that. Just like you can feel their energy. They can tell when you do or don't have your stuff together. But when you do have solid process and system, and you can educate them on what that is, then that's when the transfer of trust happens. That's when they understand that you own what you're doing and therefore you are worth it. They still may decide that they don't have the pocketbook for it, but they won't question you on it. And more likely, they'll go away if they cannot afford it at that point, waiting, hoping, and wishing for when they can come back. And of course, all the ones that can afford it at that moment will say yes. Okay? All right. Now, when I love when successful interior designers share the lessons they've learned along the way. And this is exactly what Michelle is doing with her 1-year-long mentorship, Interior Design Business Bakery. It's a group program with other master coaches as well. It helps you move through the processes that Michelle has learned the hard way in her business journey. Okay. She does one-on-one time within the group setting. There's also an active private Facebook group. There's a rolling enrollment, so you can join at any time. Go to designedforthecreativemind.com. Okay, that is the hub where you can find everything. The Interior Design Business Bakery. She has her summit coming up. I think it's like next week. Okay, so I don't know if registration is still open, if it's not still open or not, but head over to designedforthecreativemind.com to learn about it. And then, of course, I mentioned that she has her own podcast, Design for the Creative Mind. All right. So, and don't forget, she's offering to you the free guide, the Interior Design Business Review and Planning Guide. Just go to designedforthecreativemind.com/LuAnn. Okay, so that is the Interior Design Business Review and Planning Guide. You can start implementing the information in her guide immediately and start to elevate your business and your life, right? Okay, we will put the link for that in the show notes as well. Well, you could hear how much I enjoyed talking with Michelle. I really am impressed. I'm just so grateful that we finally got connected after, swirling around each other for these last couple of years. And I'm sure we're going to be seeing and hearing more of her because you know how I am. I find the smart ones, I keep them. So thank you, Michelle, so much for sharing your insights with us. And thank you for listening. Decide to be excellent. Thank you for joining me today. This podcast is a production of LuAnn Niagara, Inc. If you want to know more about me, my books, or LuAnn University, go to LuAnnNiagara.com. And if you are interested in having WindowWorks help you with your next window treatment or awning project in the New York, New Jersey metro area, go to WindowWorksNJ.com to learn more. Have an excellent day.